She was leaving the worst date of her life. Then the ruthless dawn locked the doors. "You're mine now." The waiter had already stopped making eye contact with her. That was how Nadia knew the night was beyond saving. She sat across from a man named Colin who had spent the last 40 minutes talking about his morning routine. Not his life, not his work, not a single question about her. His morning routine, the cold shower, the protein shake, the 15-minute breathing exercise he had read about in a book he kept trying to remember the name of. He snapped his fingers 3 times trying to pull the title from the air. It did not come. The conversation moved on. Nadia moved nowhere. She was already gone in every way that mattered, sitting there with her hands wrapped around a glass of water that had gone warm while she looked at the door. The restaurant was called Costello. It was one of those places that cost a lot of money and worked very hard to make you feel like that was your fault. The candles were electric. The menus had no prices. The ceiling had exposed brick that had almost certainly been glued there by someone paid a great deal to make things look accidental. Nadia's friend Claire had pulled a favor to get them a reservation, and Nadia had already decided in her head that the favor was going to cost Claire something significant when this was over. She had agreed to this date because her sister had asked her to. That was the whole reason. Her younger sister Lily, who believed in love the way some people believe in good weather, had shown her Colin's profile and said, "Just go once. You never go anywhere." And Nadia, who loved her sister too much and herself too little in moments like these, had said fine. Fine. One dinner. Colin was not a bad man. He was not even a boring man in the way that some men are boring, where you can feel the emptiness sitting inside them like a hollow space. He was boring in a much more specific way. He was boring because he was deeply, sincerely interested in things that had nothing to do with her, and had not once, in 40 minutes, attempted to change that. He had ordered for her without asking. She ate what arrived. She had made a decision sometime around the soup course that she was simply going to survive this. Then the bill came. Colin looked at it. He looked at her. He picked up his phone. A notification sound came from her bag. She looked at it without meaning to. It was a payment request, from Colin, for exactly half the bill, itemized. Her pasta was listed separately. He was still sitting across from her. The table between them had not grown. The night had not ended. He had sent her a payment request for her half of a meal she had not chosen while they were still at the table together, and he was now watching her with the expression of a man who believed he had done something both fair and efficient. Nadia put her phone back in her bag. She took one breath. Then she reached for her coat. "I have an early morning," she said. She did not have an early morning. Colin started talking about his early morning. She stood up. She gathered her bag. She pushed her chair in, because she had been raised to push her chair in, and the muscle memory ran too deep to abandon even now. She said it was lovely. The word lovely left her mouth and she watched it go without guilt. Some words exist only for situations like this one. Lovely was one of them. She walked toward the exit. The restaurant had one main door at the front, framed by dark wood and frosted glass panels, with a small entry corridor that led out to the street. It was the kind of door you would never notice on your way in, because you were busy looking at the room. On the way out, it was the most beautiful door she had ever seen in her life. She walked toward it the way a person walks toward the end of a very long week. There were 2 men standing in front of it. Not waiting for a table, not checking a phone, standing. The way people stand when standing is the job. Nadia smiled at them. "Excuse me." Neither of them moved. She looked at the door. She looked at them. She looked at the door again. "I'd like to go out," she said. One of them looked past her, somewhere over her left shoulder, for exactly 1 second. Then he looked back at her. He did not speak. He did not move. His expression was the human equivalent of a wall. Nadia turned around. The restaurant had thinned out. Most tables were empty. The staff moved around the edges of the room in that quiet way they do at the end of the night, when they want you to leave but cannot say so. The electric candles flickered in a loop. A soft piece of piano music played from somewhere, the same 4 bars cycling back every 40 seconds. She noticed the table in the corner. Not because it was loud, the opposite, because it was the stillest point in the room. 2 men on the outside, one on the inside, and the one on the inside was looking at her with the kind of attention that does not announce itself. Calm, focused. like he had been looking for a while and saw no reason to pretend otherwise. She did not look away. He did not look away. Then he set down his glass, said something to the man beside him that she could not hear, and stood up. He was tall. He wore a dark jacket, no tie, the kind of clothes that cost enough that they looked like they cost nothing. He walked across the restaurant the way men walk when they have never once in their lives needed to make room for anyone, not rushed, not slow, like the floor knew in advance where he was going. He stopped in front of her, not too close, the exact distance of a man who understood space, and was choosing this particular amount of it very deliberately. "You're leaving," he said. "Trying to," she said. He glanced once at the door, then back at her. Something very small crossed his face, not a smile, closer to recognition, like she had said something correct. "One drink," he said. "Stay. I don't know you." "No," he agreed. "Not yet." Behind her, the door stayed closed. Nadia stood in the middle of Costello, her coat over her arm, her bag on her shoulder, the night still young in the worst possible way, and she looked at this man who had just locked the exit of a restaurant and invited her to have a drink with him, like one of these things was entirely normal. She was not afraid. That was the thing she would think about later, at home, with the lights on and her shoes still on and her brain running in circles. She was not afraid. She was something else entirely. Something that did not have a clean name, and she was not going to give it one. She looked at the door one more time. She looked at him. She sat back down. Not because the door was closed. She told herself that very clearly, in the most honest corner of her mind, and she believed it about 70% of the way. That was the night that did not end the way any night was supposed to end. And it was the night, she would understand much later, that everything else in her life would eventually be measured against. Colin had paid his half of the bill and left 12 minutes after Nadia sat back down. She knew this because she watched him stand, look in her direction once without waving, and walk out the door that now opened perfectly fine for him. The two men stepped aside without a word. The frosted glass swung shut behind him. The night absorbed him. Nadia sat at the corner table with a glass of something cold in front of her that she had not ordered but did not send back, and across from her sat a man whose name she did not know yet. "That was your date," he said. It was not a question. "That was my date," she confirmed. He left. He did. "How do you feel about that?" She thought about it for one honest second, like someone opened a window in a room that hadn't had air in a long time. He looked at her. That focused, unhurried look that she was already learning was just how he looked at things, like he had decided they were worth the full attention and was going to give it whether they were comfortable with it or not. "I'm Nadia," she said. "I know," he said. She waited. "Zane," he said. Not Zane something, just Zane. The way people give a first name when the last name is either irrelevant or too much information for a first conversation. She filed that away without examining it too closely. The restaurant emptied around them over the next hour. Chairs lifted onto tables at the edges of the room. The piano music stopped. The waiter refilled her glass once without being asked, and then disappeared entirely, which she found either very professional or very strange depending on how she chose to think about it. Zane did not ask what she did for work. He did not ask where she was from, or where she went to school, or any of the usual questions that first conversations are built from. Those neat little facts people trade like cards to decide if the other person is worth keeping in the game. He simply talked to her, and listened to her, and the conversation went in directions she had not expected and could not have predicted, and at no point in the evening did she look at the door. She found out he laughed exactly twice. The first time was when she described the itemized payment request and the look on Colin's face when he sent it, that particular expression of a man who thought he had solved a problem. Zane's laugh was short and real, and surprised him, she could tell, like it had arrived before he approved it. The second time was later, when she said something about her time in London, something that was true, and a little sharp, and not meant to be funny, and he laughed anyway. Not at her, at the precision of it, at the fact that she had found the exact right word for something most people spent entire sentences failing to describe. She told him she had spent 4 years abroad, London, a degree she technically had and practically didn't use. She had come back to Lahore 2 years ago, which was either a decision she had made or a decision that had made itself, depending on her mood when someone asked about it. He said, "Which is it tonight?" She said, "Tonight, it was mine." He nodded, like she had confirmed something. She told him about Lily. Not everything. The short version, the version that fit in a few sentences. Her sister who sent her on terrible dates because she believed that love was a thing that happened to people who went outside. Zane listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which already put him ahead of most people she had met in the last 2 years. "She sounds like she worries about you," he said. "She sounds like she loves me, and that looks like worry sometimes." He was quiet for a moment. That's a generous way to read it. "She's my sister. She gets generous readings." Something shifted in his expression, very slightly. The way light shifts when a cloud moves somewhere far away, and you almost miss it. She asked him one question all night, just one, because she had decided somewhere around the second drink that she was going to treat this conversation the way he was treating it, with the same patience, the same refusal to rush. So she waited until it felt right, and then she asked, "What do you do?" He looked at her for a moment, not stalling, deciding how much of an answer to give. "I manage things," he said. "What kind of things?" "The kind that need managing." She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them blinked. "That's not an answer," she said. "It's the answer I have for tonight." She should have pushed. She would think about that later too, whether pushing would have changed anything, whether knowing sooner would have sent her out that door and into the regular night, and back to her regular life. She decided, eventually, that it would not have. That the answer she got was already enough of an answer if she had been paying attention. And she had been paying attention. She had just chosen not to name what she was seeing. The man she had first noticed sitting beside Zane appeared at one point, leaning down to say something quiet. Zane listened without turning his head. Said 2 words back. The man went away. Zane picked up his glass like nothing had happened. And for all Nadia could tell, for him, nothing had. That was the first time she understood, in her body rather than her brain, that this man operated in a world that ran on a different set of rules than the one she moved through every day. Not illegal necessarily, not anything she could name or point to, just different. The way some buildings have floors that don't appear on the directory. The way some rooms stay locked, not because there's nothing in them, but because what's in them is not for everyone. She was not afraid of that either. She thought about that later too. At 1:47 in the morning, by the clock on her phone, Zane stood. She stood. He walked her out through the door that now opened without any drama at all, out into the cool of the Lahore night, and they stood on the pavement for a moment in the easy silence of 2 people who have said enough. He did not ask for her number. He did not touch her, not her hand, not her arm, nothing. He said, "You'll come back." She said, "Will I?" It was not quite a question. He heard that. "Yes," he said, simply, like he was reading something that had already been written. She went home. She sat on the edge of her bed with her shoes still on and the light still on, and she thought about the door that had stayed closed, and the man who had been sitting at the corner table, and the way the whole night had gone sideways in a direction she had not known existed before this evening. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lily. How was it? Nadia looked at the message for a long time. "Interesting," she typed back. "Tell you later." She did not sleep well, not because she was worried, because she was thinking. There was a difference, and she knew it, and she was honest with herself about it in the dark. In 9 days she went back to Costello. She told herself it was because Claire still owed her for the terrible reservation, and she wanted to collect on that by having a good meal somewhere decent. She built the reason carefully and from quality materials. It was a good reason. It held together under casual inspection. She arrived at 7:30. She sat at a different table. She ordered coffee, which she took the way she always took it, which was wrong on purpose, because she had decided at 19 that she liked the edge of it, that something about the bitterness agreed with her in a way she had never needed to justify to anyone. Zane arrived at 8. He did not look surprised to see her. He crossed the room, pulled out the chair across from her, and sat down. "Coffee," he said, looking at her cup. "Coffee," she agreed. "This late?" "I sleep fine." He ordered the same. He took his correctly. She noted that. "You came back," he said. I told you I'd think about it. You didn't say that. She had not said that. He was right. She had said, will I, and he had said yes, and that had apparently been the whole agreement, and they had both known it. I came back, she said instead. He looked at her with that focused, unhurried look. Why? She picked up her cup. She took a sip. She set it back down. Because the conversation wasn't finished, she said. He nodded slowly, like she had passed something without being told there was a test. Then let's finish it, he said. They both knew they were not going to finish it. Not that night. Not for a long time. She came back a third time a week later, and a fourth time 3 days after that. And at some point in that stretch of evenings, the word date stopped applying to what they were doing, which meant something else was applying, something she had not named, and was not going to name until it named itself. Zane was not easy. This was the thing she kept bumping up against, the thing she had not anticipated and could not quite get her footing around. She had known difficult people before, cold people, closed people, people who kept you at a distance so effectively that you eventually stopped trying to cross it. Zane was none of those things. He was present. He was paying attention. He was, in the specific way that mattered most to her, genuinely interested. He was just not going to perform anything he did not feel. He was not going to soften himself around the edges to make her more comfortable. He was not going to pretend that uncertainty between two people was a problem to be smoothed over, rather than a condition to be sat with. She had spent most of her adult life around men who performed, who did the thing they thought she needed and called it caring, who smoothed and gentled and adjusted, and in doing so had made her feel, more times than she wanted to count, like something fragile that needed to be handled, rather than a person who could handle herself. Zane looked at her like she could handle herself. He looked at her like he expected her to, and when she did, he did not seem surprised. He seemed correct. This took some getting used to. There was a night in the fourth week, a rooftop she had not known existed on top of a building she had assumed from the outside was a parking structure, or an office, or nothing particular. They had driven for 20 minutes, and she had not asked where they were going, and when they arrived and went up in an elevator that required a key, and opened onto an open-air space with low furniture, and a view of the city that went on in every direction, she had stood at the edge of it, and not said anything for a while, because sometimes the right response to something is just to be in it. Zane stood beside her. He did not fill the silence. He never filled silences. He let them exist, which was either a deeply respectful quality or a deeply unsettling one, and with him she could never quite separate the two. This is yours, she said. It's available to me, he said. She looked at him. There's a difference, he said. Is there? Yes. She looked back at the city. The lights went on to the horizon, orange and white, and the occasional blinking red of something tall. The night was cool. Below them the sound of traffic was constant, but faint, like the city was breathing at a low volume. You never explain yourself, she said. Do you want me to? She thought about it. No, I just notice it. Noticing is fine. You're a very strange man, Zane. I know, he said. He said it without embarrassment and without pride, just acknowledgement, like she had told him something he had always been aware of and had made his peace with long before tonight. She had been holding something back for 3 weeks. A question, or not quite a question. Something closer to the thing that sits underneath a question. The thing the question is actually about when you strip the words away. She had been holding it and waiting, and telling herself she was waiting for the right time, but the truth was, she was waiting until she had to, until holding it became harder than letting it go. She let it go. That night at Costello, she said, the door. He was quiet. Why did you do that? He did not answer immediately. He picked up his glass, which had water in it, not anything stronger. She had noticed over the weeks that he drank rarely and carefully, and he looked out at the city for a moment. You were leaving, he said. I was trying to leave a bad date. That's different from needing to be stopped. I wasn't stopping you. She looked at him. I was asking you to stay, he said. The door was a question with a different shape. She sat with that for a moment. Part of her wanted to push back on it, to say that questions with locked doors were not really questions at all. But she also remembered standing in that restaurant, in the corridor, looking at the two men who did not move, and the feeling she had had. She had been through it enough times in her memory to trust it now. She had not been afraid. She had felt, for the first time in a long time, like someone had seen her walking out of the room and decided that was not acceptable. Not because of what they needed from her, because of something else, something she still could not name cleanly. "That's a complicated way to ask someone to stay," she said. "You're a complicated person," he said. A simple ask would have gotten a polite no and a cab home. She could not argue with that. She said, "Tell me what you actually do." He looked at her. The question had come up once before, and he had answered it the way he answered things that were too large for a single conversation, with the smallest available truth. She had let it go that night. She was not letting it go tonight. He was quiet for long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then he set his glass down and turned to look at her directly, with that full, settled attention that she had learned meant he was choosing his words the way other people chose tools, for the specific job and nothing else. "I manage interests," he said. "Property, contracts, arrangements between people who need things to be handled quietly. Some of those arrangements are straightforward. Some are complicated. All of them require someone who can be trusted not to make things worse." "And are they always legal?" she asked. He looked at her for one long beat. "They're always mine," he said. She looked at him. He looked at her. He did not say yes. She noticed that. She chose, in that moment, and with clear eyes, not to say anything about it. That choice was also hers. She knew it was. She had known for several weeks that Zane operated in a world where some things did not have clean names, where some doors stayed closed not from oversight but from design, where the men in the corridor at Costello were not coincidence but infrastructure. She had known it the way you know a room is cold before you walk into it, from the quality of the air. She could walk out. Not the door at Costello. The door that now stood open every time she was near him. The door of the choice, which was always available to her, and always would be. She understood that too about him. That whatever Zane was, he was not someone who held people against their nature. She did not walk out. "Okay," she said. Just that. "Okay." He looked at her for a moment. Something moved in his expression that was not quite softness, but was adjacent to it. Something that existed in the space between walls, and the warmth of them. "You're not going to ask more," he said. "Tonight I asked enough," she said. He picked up his glass again. She looked out at the city. Below them, Lahore breathed and moved, and went on with its ordinary business. Up here the air was cool, and the lights were beautiful, and the man beside her was not simple, and the life he moved through was not clean, and she was sitting in the middle of all of it, with both eyes open. The anger she had expected to feel, the one she always reached for when things got complicated, the sweet familiar kind that had steadied her through difficult years, did not come tonight. Something steadier came instead. She did not name it. She did not need to. 3 months had passed since the night at Costello, and Nadia understood something now that she had not understood then. Learning a person like Zane was not a single event. It was not a revelation that arrived once and then sat still. It was a series of small understandings that accumulated over time, like water finding its level, each one adjusting something she thought she had already figured out. She understood his silences now. Not what was inside them, those were still his, and he kept them carefully, but their quality. The difference between the silence that meant he was thinking, and the one that meant he had thought, and was letting her catch up, and the one that meant the conversation had arrived somewhere he was not going to go further into tonight. She had learned to read those distinctions, and he had, she believed, noticed that she could, because he had stopped filling them in on her behalf the way he had done in the first few weeks when he still wasn't sure how much she could handle holding. She could handle quite a lot. He seemed to find this interesting in a way that had never quite resolved into surprise. There were parts of his life she did not touch, not because he pushed her away from them, he never pushed, but because the shape of those spaces was clear, and she had her own kind of intelligence about the world, the kind that knows when a door is not for her without needing a sign. There were phone calls he took in different rooms. There were men who appeared and disappeared from his periphery, with the smooth efficiency of people who had been doing exactly this for years. There were moments where a decision clearly happened between the time she asked him something and the time he answered. A small internal calculation she was not part of, and was not meant to be part of. She had made her peace with the architecture of him. That was how she thought of it. Not the man, the architecture, the structure underneath the structure, the load-bearing parts of who he was that had been laid down long before she arrived and would not shift because she was there. She was not trying to shift them. She was not sure she would even want to, because the things that made him difficult were made from the same material as the things that made him worth staying for, and you could not pull one out without changing the other. One afternoon she met his associate, a man named Henry, who had a quiet face and a very calm voice, and who looked at her with the particular expression of someone running a rapid and efficient assessment. He was not rude, he was not warm. He was professional in the way that certain people are professional, where the professionalism is not a manner but a condition, something they carry with them the way other people carry tension in their shoulders. Henry had said, in the course of a 30-minute conversation, exactly 14 words directly to her. She counted. She did not know why she counted. She counted because it was something to do with the attention she was spending on him, which was significant, because Henry was interesting the way knives are interesting, useful and precise, and something you wanted to understand the function of before you were near one. Afterward, when they were alone, she asked Zane about him. "He's been with me for a long time," Zane said. "He doesn't trust me." "He doesn't trust anyone," Zane said. "That's why he's useful." "Does that bother you, having someone near you who doesn't trust?" Zane looked at her. "Henry trusts me. That's what matters." "And me? You're not asking Henry to trust you," he said. "You're asking me to." She thought about that. "Do you?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. "I'm here," he said. For Zane, she had come to understand, this was a complete and significant answer. There was a day, about 2 weeks into the 4th month, when something happened that she had not expected. Not an event exactly, more like a cracking open, the way ice gives way in the beginning of spring, not all at once but in a sound and a shift, and then a change, that has already happened before you finish hearing it. They were sitting in his car, outside a building she had been to once before, waiting for something she did not know the details of. This was also something she had adjusted to, the waiting without knowing what she was waiting for. He had asked her once, early on, if that bothered her. She had thought about it honestly. "It would bother me if you seemed worried," she had said. "You don't seem worried." He had said nothing to that, but something in how he held himself had changed slightly, and she had understood that she had given him something he had not expected to receive. In the car that afternoon he said, without preamble, "My father died when I was 12. She did not move. She did not fill the space with sympathy sounds or questions. She waited. "He ran things," Zane said. "I watched him. For 12 years I watched him run things, and I thought I understood what that meant." He paused. "I was wrong about what it cost." She waited. "By the time I was right," he said, "it was what I did. It was already the thing I knew how to do better than anything else." She sat in that for a moment. She understood that this was not a confession. It was not a request for absolution. It was something he was giving her because she had stayed long enough to receive it, and giving it was its own kind of trust, not the kind that asked for anything back, just the kind that opened a door and let the light come through and did not ask her to come in. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once. He did not elaborate, neither did she. But something had shifted, the way things shift when the load-bearing part of something finally shows itself, and you realize the building was never what you thought it was. It was always this. It was always built around this. And now that you can see it, you understand the whole shape of the thing differently. She looked out the window at the building across the street, its ordinary face and its closed windows and whatever was inside it, that was Zane's business and not hers. She thought about the woman who had walked toward the door at Costello 3.5 months ago, her coat over her arm and her bag on her shoulder, and the whole terrible date behind her, and the regular night ahead of her. That woman had been competent and capable, and had been moving through the world under her own power, with full intention. She thought about what that woman had been moving through toward. Nothing terrible, nothing wrong, just more of the same. More dates, more surfaces, more conversations that stayed on the level of facts, rather than going underneath them to where things were actually true. More of the life she had built with skill and care and the particular stubbornness of a person who decided at some point to ask nothing from anyone that she could provide herself. She had been very good at that life. She had not been very full in it. She would never say that out loud, not to Lily, who would make it into a lesson about going outside, not to Claire, who would tell the story at dinner parties, barely even to herself, in the quiet dark of her own room, because saying it out loud gave it a weight that she was not sure she was ready to carry in the open. But she knew it. She sat in Zane's car outside a building she did not know, on a day that had not been planned, and she knew it in the way you know true things, without drama, without a moment of arrival, just the settled understanding that something was different now, and there was no useful way to pretend otherwise. She did not say any of this to him. He looked over at her once, just a glance, the quick kind that, with him, still carried the full attention. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm thinking," she said. He nodded and looked back at the building. "Let me know when you get there." She almost smiled. She turned it into something more contained. "You'll be the first," she said. 6 months. The number arrived one morning while Nadia was standing at her kitchen counter with her coffee cup in her hand, not yet dressed, looking at nothing in particular, and it landed in her brain with the weight of something that had been quietly true for a while, and was only now being counted. 6 months since the night at Costello. 6 months since the door that did not open, and the man at the corner table, and the choice she had made to sit back down. She had told Lily, eventually. Not everything. The version she gave her sister was accurate in all its parts and incomplete in its whole, which was not dishonesty so much as the normal editing you do when the full story belongs to more people than just you. Lily had asked a lot of questions. Nadia had answered the ones she could. Lily had gone quiet in a particular way that meant she was deciding something. Then Lily had said, "Is he good to you?" Nadia had thought about that word. Good. How wide it was. How much it could cover, and how little it sometimes did. "Yes," she said. "In his way, yes." Lily had accepted that. She trusted Nadia's eyes. That was the arrangement between them, had always been the arrangement. Lily had faith in the world, and Nadia had sharp eyes, and together they had a good rate of accuracy. On the 6-month morning, Nadia finished her coffee and got dressed and went about her day, which involved a work meeting that ran long, lunch with Claire who said something funny and something thoughtful, and something that needed to be corrected, and a walk in the evening through a part of the city she had always liked for its quietness, the way it absorbed foot traffic without losing its character. Zane called while she was walking. "Where are you?" he asked. She told him. "I'll send a car," he said. "I'm walking," she said. "On purpose." A pause. "I know. I'll send a car to where you'll be in 40 minutes. She looked up at the street ahead of her, did the math. He had either asked someone where she was, or he knew this part of the city well enough to project her route from a single landmark. Both options told her something. "Fine," she said. She walked for 40 minutes. The car was there. He was not in it. He was already at the restaurant when she arrived, a place she had not been before, small, and not particularly notable from the outside, the kind of place you either know or you don't. He was at a corner table. She noticed that he always chose corners. She had never asked him about it. She understood it without asking. She sat down. He poured her water. "How was your day?" he asked. It was such a simple question. Such an ordinary, daily, unremarkable question. She had heard it hundreds of times from hundreds of people, and it had always been a door that opened onto small talk, onto the surfaces that people use to fill the space between silence and meaning. When Zane asked it, she had learned, he was actually asking. He wanted to know how her day had been. He was going to listen to the answer the way he listened to everything, fully and without hurry, and what she said was going to land somewhere and stay there. She told him about the meeting and about Claire's 3 statements and about the walk. He listened to all of it. He asked one question, about the part of the walk she liked, what it was specifically. She thought about it and gave him an honest answer, that it was the way the buildings there had been put up in different decades without anyone trying to make them match, so the street had a kind of accidental honesty to it, everything showing its age plainly. He nodded like she had described something he recognized. "That's what you like," he said. "Things that don't pretend." She looked at him. "You've liked that about everything you've chosen," he said. "Your coffee, Your work, the places you go, the people you spend time with. The people I spend time with, she said. Yes. She looked at him steadily. You're saying I chose you because you don't pretend. I'm saying, he said carefully, that I think you knew from the beginning that I wasn't going to, and you stayed anyway. She was quiet for a moment. That's not the same as choosing you, she said. No, he agreed, but it's where choosing starts. She thought about the door again, not because she was still thinking about whether she had made the right choice. She had moved past that, somewhere around the 3rd month. She thought about it because it had become a kind of marker for her, a before and after. The woman who had been trying to leave, and the woman who had stayed. Not because she had been made to, not because the situation had controlled her, because she had stood in that corridor and looked at the man across the room and made a calculation that she had stood behind every day since. She thought about all the things she had expected this to become and had not. She had expected to feel like she was losing something, like the life she had built and managed carefully was being exchanged for something uncertain. She did not feel that. The life she had was still hers, her work, her sister, her walk through the part of the city with the honest buildings. Zane was not a replacement for any of that. He was something that had appeared alongside it, something that added a dimension she had not previously thought was available to her. She had expected him to be dangerous, in ways that frightened her. He was complicated in ways that required her attention. That was different. She had expected at some point to stop being interested. That had not happened. 6 months, she said. He looked at her. Since Costello, she said. He was quiet for a moment. She could see him doing what he did, choosing the weight of his answer. Yes, he said. What do you think about that? He looked at her across the table in the small restaurant that she did not know and he had chosen, in the corner where he always sat, with the water he had poured her when she arrived. I think, he said slowly, that you were the most certain thing I had seen in a long time, and I think I recognized that before I could have told you what I was recognizing. She held that. The door, she said. You asked me to stay. Yes. And if I had left anyway? He was quiet for one honest beat. Then you would have left, he said. That was always available to you. She knew it was true. She had always known it was true. But there was something different about hearing him say it plainly, without apology, and without revision. Just the fact of it, laid out clean. She thought about the woman with her coat over her arm, walking toward the exit and the regular night and the life that had been waiting on the other side of those doors. She held her with something careful and real. That woman had been doing exactly what she needed to do with what she had. She had been strong and self-sufficient, and very, very good at managing on her own. She had also been hungry in a way she had not had words for, not for love exactly, or not only for love, but for someone who looked at her like she was the full complicated thing she was, and did not flinch at any of it. For someone who sat with her in the difficult parts of a conversation, without rushing toward the exit. For someone who understood that some things do not need to be explained to be real. She had walked toward one door and found another one she had not known was there. I'm glad I stayed, she said. He looked at her. That full, settled look. I know, he said. And she believed him completely, which was the most surprising thing of all. Not that he knew, but that it had stopped surprising her that he did. Outside the restaurant, the city went on. Loud and ordinary and full of people making their way through evenings they would mostly not remember. Dinners and streets and small decisions that accumulated into lives. Inside, in the corner, 2 people sat across a table, with water between them, and a conversation that did not have an end yet, that was still finding its shape, that would be finding it for a long time. Nadia picked up her glass. She was not afraid of that. She had not been afraid for months. And for a woman who had spent a long time managing the world from a careful distance, who had walked through plenty of doors and kept walking, who had built her life with her own 2 hands and expected nothing from anyone she could not provide herself, not being afraid of this particular thing, was the truest measure she had of how far she had come from the night she almost did not stay. She had almost made it out. She was so glad she had not.